This week on YCN Vermont Wrap, we're back after taking last week off, and it's casual weekend. That's right. Even us stuffed shirt conservatives, we've got to shed the jacket from time to time. We've got a fresh batch of news stories to discuss. Also, Tom Marsh will join me to discuss a proposal to change the name of a mountain. Tom is the manager of the town of Windsor. I'll also have a fresh installment of political potpourri, and we'll reach into the mailbag from the past 2 weeks. You're watching YCN Vermont Wrap. Come on, let's go have some fun. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. In a report released earlier this week by CNBC, the state of Vermont was ranked as, get this, the best state in which to live out of all 50 states, or 57 states if you follow the Obama geography model, using factors such as affordable housing, quality of education, cost of living, healthcare quality, and of course the environment. Vermont earned the ranking at the top of that list overall. The top 10 states were, in ascending order, Massachusetts at number 10, Colorado at number 9, Montana and Iowa tied for number 7, Washington and New Hampshire tied at number 5, North Dakota at number 4, number 3, Minnesota, Hawaii at number 2, and Vermont at number 1. According to the report, quote, the Green Mountain State has America's second lowest crime rate, a healthy population, a pristine environment, and strong anti-discrimination laws to make sure that all can enjoy the place. End quote. That was a direct quote, by the way. It's kind of interesting that CNBC chooses Vermont and Hawaii as one of the most affordable places to live. Now, I've never lived in Hawaii, but I know a lot of people that do. $5 per gallon gas and milk at about $6 per gallon? Yep, sounds affordable to me. But hey, you know what? Maybe if the administration keeps cranking up the taxes, you'll be paying that at the pump and that at the grocery store as well. No guns at the Vermont State Fair. That's according to Louis Clough, the president of the Rutland County Agricultural Society. Clough's organization owns the grounds where the fair is held and conducts the day-to-day operations of the fair. That ruling comes after the Rutland County Agricultural Society met with New York State-based gun dealer David Petronas. In a statement released on Wednesday, Clough said, and I quote, "We just can't do it for the fair. There's too many 4-H kids. We don't need somebody walking up the midway with an AK-47. We're a family fair, and it just didn't fit in." Clough did say that the fair had 2 vendors who sold knives, and that those vendors would be permitted to continue the sale of edged weapons. Evidently, AK-47s, yep, big problem. Concealed handguns, yep, big problem. But, you know, edged weapons, be it a folding buck knife or maybe even a 6 to 8 inch fixed blade hunting knife, not a problem. The Vermont State Fair, if you're so inclined to attend, runs from August 14th through August 18th. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to discuss a push to rename Mount Ascutney. I'll be joined by the Windsor town manager, Tom Marsh. He joins me from Windsor when YCN Vermont Wrap continues. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. There's been a discussion brewing for the past several years by a group of, now let's say, concerned citizens, that the name of Mount Ascutney is misleading. That is, if you're fluent in Abenaki. Now, there's a petition that's been filed with the Vermont Board of Libraries to formally change the name of the mountain. Joining me from the town of Windsor is the Windsor town manager, Tom Marsh. Tom, thank you so much for being a part of the program this weekend.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so how long, first of all, how long have you been town manager?
I've been town manager since the summer of 2011, just after Irene arrived.
Okay. How long has this been a thing?
As I recall, sometime around mid-2016, there was some news coverage of it, but I heard about it then and it kind of went away.
Okay, so according to, and I've got a copy of the application to the Vermont Board of Libraries. It's called a Geographic Naming Petition. And this actually does go back to, it looks like November 19th of 2016. The main petitioner's name is Robert Hutchins. He's a resident of Heartland, Vermont. And according to the supporting documentation, the issue surrounds the name that was originally assigned to Mount Ascutney, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce Abenaki. I'll give it a shot. The name Ascutney stems from an Abenaki Indian name that, if I'm pronouncing it phonetically, looks like Ascutjanik, or something to that effect, which is Abenaki meaning white water. So the petition is seeking to change the name from Mount Ascutney to Mount Cascadnac, which is an anglicized variant of an Abenaki name meaning wide mountain. So evidently, the name Ascutney doesn't refer to the mountain itself, it refers to the white water of the rivers that are in the region.
Correct.
Is that so? I guess one of the big questions is this a tendentious petition? I mean, is there anything really that says people are really behind this?
We haven't had any input from the community, and there's been an awful lot of discussion that there's other than very fringe support. Most people didn't understand it at all, and then when information started coming out, it's not one of those situations where they're taking an Anglo name for something and trying to move it back to an indigenous name. They're just using one indigenous name to replace with another indigenous name, and nobody has really found the argument to be compelling enough to overcome the history and personal connection people in this area have with the mountain.
So you joined me on my radio program, and one of the things that I brought up there was in central Massachusetts, there's a lake that its common name is Webster Lake. People know it as Webster Lake. The official name of Webster Lake, and I'm actually firing this off from memory, is Lake Chargagagog Manchagagog Chowbunagungumog. That's the official name. And as a matter of fact, if you were to Google the patch for the Webster, Massachusetts Police Department, you'll see that wrapping around the entirety of the police patch is that name, Chargagagog Manchagagog Chowbunagungumog, which is Native American for you fish on your side, I fish on my side, and nobody fishes in the middle. So that's a great concept. The point being is that Webster Lake, or Lake Chargagagog Manchagagog Chowbunagungumog, whichever you prefer to call it, it kind of goes by two names, and there's some balance there. Some people call it its original Native American name. Other people call it by Webster Lake. I guess the question is, why do we have to go through this formal process of actually petitioning the Vermont Board of Libraries to formally change the name? If you want to call it Mount Cascadnac, call it Mount Cascadnac. If you want to call it Mount Ascutney, call it Mount Ascutney. Why do we have to formalize the process?
Well, I think that's a question a lot of people have, and related to that is, I think you could have asked 100 people on the street in Windsor, how does the process of naming geological forms work in Vermont, and nobody would have been able to tell you the answer. So now we've all learned the process, and it's surprising that a petition with 25 signatures on it can compel the board to even make a consideration. It's a fairly low bar for, depending on what community you're in and what geological formation you're trying to rename, can create an awful lot of controversy, as we've seen here in Windsor.
So, I guess one of the biggest questions that I have is, do you think that given the political climate today, with especially with Confederate statues of Confederate soldiers and Confederate generals, there's this push to kind of whitewash our history. Do you think that this is something that, if it wasn't necessarily filed or being discussed at this particular point in time, when the topic of changing or whitewashing history is such a hot button topic, that this may actually gain or would have gained more traction than it has?
Well, since the original effort began before this current movement, I don't think it was the originator's intent. Maybe that's what brought it to light now when it did. Maybe that's more than coincidence. But even in that regard, so much of what we see nationally has more to do with cultural changes and people trying to erase our history or overwrite our history. And that was one of the real puzzling things here, is there were Native Americans running around this area all over the place when the mountain was being called Ascutney by the local settlers and local tribes. So there wasn't a pushback then. There hasn't been a loud voice from the Abenaki tribe in this effort that we're aware of, and all it's doing is saying the mountain is named after white water when it's really a wide mountain. Now, other than Mount Monadnock, that's a monadnock like Ascutney is, I don't recall there being any requirement to name geological formations after their actual physical attributes. So there just isn't anything compelling behind this argument.
You know, one of the things I love about doing media, both television and radio, is that I learn something virtually every time I broadcast. And I'm learning something new now. I did not know that if I wanted to change the name of a geographic formation or location in the state, that I would have to submit the petition to, of all entities, the Vermont Board of Libraries. Why is the Vermont Board of Libraries tasked with undertaking the process of a geographic location name change?
Well, other than maybe they were the board not represented at a meeting one day when they were deciding how to do this, I don't know. I did find out that the Board of Libraries is also in charge of the correct spelling on things on maps and around the state, so maybe that's just where the namers and the best spellers reside.
So what's the likelihood that this would actually pass? That the and what, I guess before asking you whether or not it would pass, what is the process? According to the petition that I have the copy of it here. 25 signatures is all I need to get a geographic name change petition in front of the Vermont Board of Libraries. Is it that simple? And the supporting documentation as to why I feel the name that whatever geographic location or geographic formation whose name I'm trying to change is incorrect. Is that really all it is?
As far as we understand it is, I mean, it's got to be a compelling enough narrative to bring the board to a decision to make the change, and we're hoping that that bar is much higher than what is required to get the signatures. So all the guidance we've been given is if there's not local support for the movement, it's next to impossible unless there's something really offensive in a name for this to be successful. So even the people behind it have been indicating, at least at our select board meeting, that they understand that this is kind of came on the scene late, that it's the beginning of a discussion, and if really what the fruit of all this effort is a better understanding of the history in the area, well, I think everybody agrees that that's generally a good thing. But to actually rename the mountain, I don't see that carrying the day.
We're speaking with the Windsor Town Manager, Tom Marsh, about the potential name change to Mount Ascutney. We're going to continue the conversation when YCN Vermont Wrap continues. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Joining me within a stone's throw of Mount Ascutney is the Windsor Town Manager, Tom Marsh. Tom, again, thanks so much for joining me this weekend.
My pleasure.
So let's move forward. Let's assume that the Vermont Board of Libraries decides to make the change. What are the implications to the residents of the town, of businesses in the area, certainly to the state? I mean, I would imagine that to go and to change names and to change maps and references on websites, I mean, the totality of that name change incorporates many, many steps that take time and certainly money. What exactly would the implications be and the consequences be of a name change?
Well, I think there's the formal and informal consequences. If the name were to be changed, that's going to create an outcry in the community. People are going to be up in arms. Everybody's going to have an opinion that they want to express, and it's going to be difficult to deal with for a while. And I don't know that there's anything that compels Mount Ascutney Hospital, for example, to change the name to Cascadnac Hospital. But I did joke that somebody should get in the sign business just in case this happens, because there's an awful lot of businesses, the hospital, Ascutney Avenue, Ascutney Street, Ascutney Market, Ascutney Trails. There's a lot of signs out there that say Ascutney on it. But I think, like in most small towns, you can have a house that's on Main Street that the Jacobs lived in 1974, and in 2018 people still call it the Jacobs house because that's who lived there when they knew the people who were in the house. And I would think it'll be a century before people would actually start using a new name. It'll be Ascutney to everybody who's walking this planet right now.
Well, I think it would be kind of interesting if they put it out and said, hey, listen, we're going to open up the floor to suggestions about what we could change the name to. If you remember the name, the boat contest in Great Britain that resulted in the #1 name, Boaty McBoatface. I would have to say, as a big fan of Oh Brother Where Art Thou, I could see Mount Ascutney changing the name to Big Rock Candy Mountain. I mean, it's just as valid. Not to belittle this. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that, for whatever politically correct reasons or whatever, feel the need to modify history, adjust, maybe make corrections to what they perceive as somebody else's grammatical error. You've always got the grammar police that are on duty 24/7. I just find this really interesting that somebody has made something like this a project when, I mean, even going back to when you had a hefty Abenaki population in the area, and when the settlers were here, they didn't have an issue. But all of a sudden, now in 2016, leading up into 2018, there's this push to now change the name of the mountain because, well, it doesn't feel right, or it's not politically correct, or something. I guess it just amazes me. Being in New England, the number of projects that people will take on, and certainly the justification for why those projects are the most important thing to that person at that time.
Yeah, I can't pretend to understand the motivation. I've taken the glass half full approach. Change is hard. If there is a process, if somebody does have a particular windmill they want to tilt against, there is a process to do it. It's kind of heartening to see that there isn't a lot of support and the idea is not going to make it anywhere. But I guess it says something about our society that if you have an opinion and you want to run it up the flagpole, there is a process to do it. So if we want to take the best out of this, I look at it that way. I view this as completely different as the national movement that we saw going on where we want to take down statues and rename places all because we don't agree with what a prior generation or a prior civilization chose to do as part of their culture. I don't think that's what's going on here. So I think this is just an individual with 25 signatures that has an idea that a mountain should be named by what it looks like instead of something else. But again, there was a Native American, Ascutney's a Native American name. It was used while there were a lot of Native Americans in the area, and for 300 years or so, it's been holding true. I would say that if you have a big family and you want to have a family reunion, now you only have to get 25 of your family members to sign it, and maybe don't pick something as big as Ascutney, pick a little brook that's not on everybody's radar and have something named after your family, and you'll be known throughout the ages.
Well, it's kind of like you can name a star after somebody, and your star will be in the International Star Registry. That's great. Hey, you know what? That would be a great revenue generator for the state of Vermont. Name a brook after somebody, and then your brook name can go in the official state record. So, hey, you know what? I think we just discovered a way to fix the budgetary issue here in the Green Mountain State. Real quick before we let you go, when was the last time that a geographic naming petition, if you know, geographic naming petition was used to successfully change the name of a geographic feature or a geographic location? Any idea? I must say that I hadn't paid much attention to the Vermont Library Board's activities prior to this event. So I think like most people, we know about McKinley and Denali. So other than that, I couldn't tell you who did what anywhere around the country. So I hope this doesn't occupy most of their schedule throughout the year. I couldn't imagine that it would. Last question, Tom. If I do decide to start a petition to rename Mount Ascutney Big Rock Candy Mountain, can I count on you to be my second signature?
Hey, in the interest of democracy, I'll be right there. Not as big as John Hancock's, but I'll sign it.
I certainly appreciate it. Tom Marsh, the town manager for the town of Windsor, thanks so much for joining me this weekend. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll probably have another conversation here once the Vermont Board of Libraries makes a ruling on this.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Tom, thank you. Coming up next on YCN Vermont Wrap, political potpourri and your letters. Don't go away. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. In this week's edition of Political Potpourri, I'd be remiss if I didn't address a report involving a gathering of first responders, public servants, medical professionals, members of the public, and, politicians, which was held in Springfield earlier in the week at the Nolan Murray Center, again in Springfield. The political luminary in attendance was Democratic Vermont Congressman Peter Welch. Now, Peter Welch, if you're not aware of Peter Welch, I'm sure you are, is the author of the Marshall Plan, or the Comprehensive Addiction Resources Emergency Act of 2018. Now, we've talked about how progressive Democrats love to solve problems. They like to throw money at the problem. Well, the Marshall Plan, check this out. This is how we solve the opioid crisis. I love how progressive Democrats are completely disconnected from reality. The Marshall Plan proposes solving the opioid crisis by providing $100 billion, with a B, dollars in funding to states over a 10-year period. Oh, where does that money come from, considering, of course, that the federal government doesn't produce anything except problems? Well, that comes from you and your taxes. But I digress. Lieutenant Mark Fountain of the Springfield Police Department was describing the current situation in the town of Springfield and surrounding communities. He said, quote, "Heroin is abundant. The heroin epidemic is creating great strains on our town." Okay, certainly understand that. Now we get into a little bit more of the progressive concept on how to solve the problem. Did you know, and this is new to me as well, that you can solve the opioid crisis by holding miniature 12-step programs at needle distribution facilities? That's right. Bring in your old needle, get a brand new needle that's clean. Oh, and while you're there, in the presence of other junkies, you can hold a miniature 12-step program. Sound crazy? Well, not really. According to Rose Gowdy, the Director of Workforce Planning and Development, she feels that addicts who have an opportunity to meet with other addicts can discuss recovery strategies while they're picking up their clean needles. Laura Byrne, the executive director of the HIV/HCV Resource Center in Lebanon, New Hampshire, said, quote, "We need more syringe services inside the state, including inside Springfield. Sometimes Brattleboro or Bellows Falls are too far away for somebody who doesn't have transportation." Hey, I got a really, really good idea. If you don't have transportation and you need needles, how about you get off the habit? That's not the big issue, though. The big issue was Congressman Peter Welch's real reason, or his belief, as to why the opioid crisis has ravaged New England, especially Vermont. I'm reading from an Eagle Times article that was published this past week. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday. Quote, "Welch discussed federal measures that could address the root problems of addiction, poverty, and hopelessness." Well, it certainly makes sense. Poverty and hopelessness could certainly be contributing causes of an addiction crisis. Noting that it's getting more and more difficult to participate in the economy without internet access. Welch says, quote, "A lot of rural America is being excluded from the economic vitality of this country. We've been seeing this two-tiered economy accelerate. We don't have an infrastructure bill. It would be a simple matter for the government to do with the internet what it did with electricity in the 1920s. I thought about this for a while, and I ran it through my own little, conservative analytical framework. I guess the best way to keep people off of addicting substances is get them hooked on internet porn. At least it'll keep their hands busy. In the mailbag from this past week, Corinne in Brattleboro writes, "Keith, thank you for having the courage to speak your mind and fight for those of us who cannot speak out. It is a blessing to have you on the airwaves." Corinne, I want to thank you, first of all, for your sentiments. You do have the ability to speak. You do live in the United States of America. You do have the right to free speech under the First Amendment. I'd encourage you to find your voice and let it sound in whatever capacity you can. Just remember, you're not alone out there. Tom in Burlington says, "Keith, you make me proud of my country and proud to be an American. I hope that YCN continues to broadcast your program and that you stay with us for many years to come." Tom, thank you for your sentiments, and I don't think you have to worry about me going anywhere anytime soon. Thanks for writing in. Angel, or Angel, I'm going to get corrected on this, I'm sure, in Middlebury writes, quote, "I can't deal with you or your rhetoric. You're a pompous windbag who needs a healthy dose of reality." Angel, here's the best part of living in a free nation. You can change the channel. But you know what? I suspect you'll continue to tune in because you know that as much as it pisses you off to admit it, there's something about my message that resonates with you. Harris from Springfield wrote, quote, "You, sir, are a true patriot. I hope you get a lot more airtime. Would love to see your show stretched out to a full hour. Need more time with your interviews and with your opinion section." Harris, from your keyboard to management's ears, my friend, thank you for that. And thank you for putting the ratio of positive letters to negative letters up to 2 and 12 this week. Come on, Bernie Bros, you're still falling well behind the curve. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. I'd like to thank Windsor Town Manager Tom Marsh, and I'm actually kind of serious about this. I'm going to have to get my rename Mount Ascutney / Mount Cascadnac to Big Rock Candy Mountain. I should put it up on my website. If you wouldn't mind, sign my petition. All I need, 25, to get it on the petition slot. As always, be sure to share your thoughts with me about this week's show. Please make a note of the new email. It's khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. Be sure to let me know the city or town that you live in as well. And be sure to follow me on Twitter @RealKeithHanson. That's @RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next week.